What's going on, beautiful world? Welcome to another episode of the Black Sheep Perspective. Today's guest, we had a great sit down a couple of days ago to get me ready for this, and I had to dig even deeper, and I got to give this man everything that he deserves. So I want to read this off my phone so you guys can get a good understanding of who we got in front of us and what we're going to talk about. So Ramesh Nyberg was born in India in 1958, arrived in the U.S. on New Year's Day. What a great time to arrive, huh? In 1959 on a freighter. Since then, he has lived in Miami, became a police officer in 1979. He spent 5 years as a uniformed police officer during Miami's historic crime wave of the early 1980s, which a lot of us know as the cocaine Cowboys days. And in 1985, he became a homicide investigator in the Miami-Dade Police Department's Elite Homicide Bureau, where he spent the rest of his career before retiring in 2006. That's a total of 27 years. 27 years. My goodness. He has 6 children and teaches criminal justice classes at Miami-Dade Magnet High School. He's an author as well. And he wrote an amazing book called
Badge, Tie, and Gun, Life and Death Journeys of a Miami Detective.
Great. You know, my neighbors got the book. They still got the book.
Your neighbors got it?
Yeah, the warehouse next door. Yeah, because they came to deliver. I wasn't here.
I should have brought one for you.
So they got it next door. Luckily, we got this delivery right now. Ramesh spares no details as he brings the reader into the crime scenes and the horrors of real violence while also conveying the ironies and often humorous aspects of law enforcement. The book is filled with riveting stories, bizarre and often dangerous pursuits of violent offenders, heart-wrenching scenes of grieving families, and gripping behind-the-scenes descriptions of suspects' confessions. The book flashes back frequently to pivotal moments of Ramesh's childhood that luminous later in his life as guiding lessons in his career as a law enforcement officer. This is unlike any other police memoir in existence. It's brutal, honest, and revealing, and highlights a time in Miami's heyday of the cocaine Cowboys. Ramesh, welcome to the podcast, brother. I really do appreciate your time.
Hey, I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you so much. There's a lot behind this, me having this yearning to speak to someone like you. You know, I one of the best documentaries, in my opinion, so well done. There's a lot of great ones out there, but one that hits home because it is home, was Cocaine Cowboys. And a lot of things that happened there during those times. Most Miamians have seen it. Plus, there's millions of people out there who have seen it who are not from Miami as well. If you haven't seen it, you got to go see it. Cocaine Cowboys. Major influence on what helped Miami become Miami. All the different variables that played different roles. Even these drug cartels that were building banks in order to clean their dirty money. Like, who the hell has money to buy a bank, build a bank just so you can clean your own money? Like, that's unimaginable. That's crazy.
Right.
But you were part of, a major time, and you were not just, you were in there because you were a homicide detective. But before we get into those stories, if you don't mind me telling me, what is it that made you want to become a police officer?
That was tough to answer for a long time. I think looking back on it, I needed something that would provide some order in my life, some direction. My dad never really was a guy that taught me organization. He was not a real organized guy himself, but that's another story. But there was also something about a love for my community. As corny as that might sound, right? I grew up in Miami, and the thought that I could go out and help people and make a difference, even a small difference in somebody's life, was a compelling thing to me.
Isn't that crazy that people find themselves in need of saying that? I know this is kind of corny. Like, what the fuck? That's not corny. That's awesome. That's prideful. Yeah. That's you want to do good for your community. That's great. So, okay, and that kind of gave you the giddy up to want to do it.
Yeah, I think that was it. If you would have asked me that when I was 21 years old, going to the police academy, I may have just said, I just want to help people. I just want to, I just want to help the effort to clean up the streets and that sort of thing. And really at that time, I nor my people in the police academy I went through the academy with, my fellow recruits, we had no idea what was coming,
right?
In terms of the onslaught.
That was early development in '79.
It was just happening. It was just starting. And So we didn't know what we were up against, because when we got out of the police academy in December of 1979, we hit the ground running, and it never stopped.
How old were you when you first joined?
I was 21 years old.
See, when I think about that, I think that's insane. I really do.
I was a baby when I look back on it. Now I'm 67 years old now, and I, I was young, and I'll go as far to say I was maybe a little more mature than most 21-year-olds there, but still I think 21 is a little too young to get into the profession. But that's we had a lot of those guys right around 21, 22. We had one guy that was 19 in the academy.
That's insane.
That was the minimum age.
I know later on I want to definitely get your take, your advice on what you would suggest should change. What are some things that can be different, moving forward to help the police department, to help officers out, to help make wiser decisions. But we'll cross that path in a little bit. So when you became police officer and you were on the streets for about 5 years, doing regular street cop stuff, and then you became a homicide detective. Now, when you became a homicide detective, again, I mentioned it earlier, and I'll relate back to it. This was during what we consider the cocaine Cowboys days. So back then, people, those of you relate to it, awesome. Those of you don't, go look it up. Back then, the drug cartel, and I'm not saying this per detail, so all you people who want to correct every little detail I get wrong. Back then, the Colombian cartel was coming in hot, and they were sending thousands upon thousands of kilos through South Florida more than any other place in order to flood all of the U.S.
That's pretty accurate, yeah.
Okay. So during that time, you have what we know as Scarface, a movie that was derived from the type of stuff that happened. Just about everybody out there has seen Scarface. If not, you probably need to jump off a bridge. And then for those of us who have seen Cocaine Cowboys, we saw a little bit more realism behind it. The news articles, actual cases, police people that were on part of those times. Surprised I didn't see you in that documentary, to be honest.
My sergeant was in there.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, there you go. So, but you're the living testament, brother. Like you are the real deal in regards of seeing so many different things that occurred then. And you also are a fan of the movie and the documentary, as we spoke about. So what I want to ask you is, I'm trying to ask this for others as well as my own interests. How much of it is accurate? How much of it can you relate, whether movie-wise? I know you can only say so much about a movie unless you fucking knew those Scarfaces themselves, you know? But how much of that was accurate, which the documentary and the movie and things that we can take from it?
Well, I'll start with Scarface. I mean, always in Hollywood's entertainment. It's not education. Cocaine Cowboys was 100% real. That's a documentary. Those were real people talking. They weren't actors.
That's right.
The John Roberts, the guy who came out of prison, and he gave his story. Al Singleton, who was my sergeant in homicide and worked primarily on the Centax squad. He was the supervisor with that squad. They dealt mostly, almost exclusively, with narcotics-related homicides. So that's the real deal, that, and everything they said in there was accurate. Scarface was a glamorized version of it, and you really didn't see a lot of people in Miami that were that visible like that. I think most of the people with the big money, as far as the cartels were concerned, were in Colombia. That's not to say we didn't have wealthy dopers here. We did. And yeah, that would be fairly accurate, I guess. But, the violence, for sure, was it was rampant. And you have to remember that cocaine brought a lot of money on the street as well.
Right.
You're not paying for 50 kilos of cocaine with a credit card. Everything is cash, right? So, these people were ruthless. If I knew you had $3 million and you're coming down from Cleveland, to buy low and sell high back in Cleveland, I might as well rip you off and kill you. What do I care? That was the kind of stuff we were dealing with a lot. So you had the money rolling in, the cocaine just kept coming in, the so-called war on drugs that our government was fighting wasn't working because the demand was here, and the demand was huge, and it trickled down to the street level, and in the mid 1980s, I would say starting 83, 84, that's when there was this transition from the powdered cocaine that people were snorting in nightclubs to the paste that eventually became crack. but back then it was called freebase. All right. So it's the same kind of stuff. It was just a little damper. It wasn't as dry as rock crack cocaine that kind of developed from freebase. And that stuff was extremely addictive. And that transformed neighborhoods, inner city neighborhoods, into just nightmarish scenes that we never thought we would see in Miami.
Were you seeing, what was the ratio of deaths from overdoses? Because this cocaine is coming in hot. It's coming in as closely as pure as possible. And, before they cut it up or how much they cut it up, obviously they cut it to a hell of a bigger extreme now. Everybody's trying to make more money. By the way, guys, when I say cut it up, I mean they mix it with a baking powder substance in order to get, and other stuff in order to get more out of the cocaine instead of selling to you as almost raw as possible. So they stretch it out, basically. So before they cut it up, it's very strong. So were you guys getting hella deaths from overdoses, or was it still more based on the killings because of the drug trafficking?
Well, we were getting both, but I think the overdoses were at a much higher ratio with the freebasing. And it seems like, and again, I'm not the expert on the biology of it, but the powdered version didn't get people as deeply addicted as the freebasing did. So, you'd have people that were, college students, lawyers, you name it, every walk of life, they're going out partying, and they're snorting and they're having a great old time, and they could put it down and not have it again for a month. You start freebasing, that's a totally different situation.
Right.
Now you got to have it because your body gets a very, very intense addiction to it, right? So we saw.
Can you elaborate a little bit for those who don't know what happens when you freebase it? Like what is
you're smoking it? All right, so you're smoking it. Back then, you needed a butane torch or something like that to keep it lit. All right, so it hadn't evolved into this drier crack cocaine version. So you're using whatever you can to keep it lit. People were using crushed up soda cans and beer cans and punching holes on them to make pipes.
Right.
They were getting pretty creative with it, but you're smoking that stuff and, however long you're high, when you come down, all you want to do is find more. So we saw a lot of street prostitution that was not like your classic prostitutes. These are sometimes women that never were prostitutes before, but now they had to get money because their bodies were a slave to this drug. Guys were going out and robbing. And so it was like this, it fueled all the street crime up, like robberies, prostitution. And again, the money flowing around on the street, that dude's a dealer. Let's rip him off. He's got money, and so we just saw a violent crime go up drastically.
What's going on, beautiful world? Just want to remind you guys that this podcast is officially hitting its 5th year anniversary, and it's all because of you. Truly appreciate all the love and support that every one of you guys have showed. And if you haven't struck that subscribe button, please do now. And if you like the content that you're hearing, how about you put that thumbs up? Now let's get back to the podcast. Was there a heavy race war when it came to the Cubans that were kind of going against the Colombians at the time? Because at that point they established that they were selling the drugs just as much as the Colombians were?
I think there might have been that to a certain extent, and I don't think it was, I think the Colombians were happy with whoever's going to buy it, right? So was there territorial stuff going on? Absolutely. There was territories and things like that. But I think the bottom line was that after a while, people realized you're not going to screw around with these cartel people, right? If they think you ripped them off, they're just going to kill you.
Right.
They're not going to sit and negotiate with you, and you're not going to kiss the Godfather's ring to get,
right.
You know what I mean? And all that shit. They're just going to take you out.
Now, the documentary had pointed out that there was a certain class one time of cops that were hired because there was a lot of cops that started quitting when shit was hitting the fan. I don't think there was many crimes against cops by these criminals. It was more so the cops didn't want to, deal with this shit anymore. So they had to hire a lot more cops. And if I'm not mistaken, in the documentary, they said that a whole class, one entire class of cadets were eventually arrested and part of some of the mischief, some of the corruption that was going on. So my question to you is not so much about that and like to point out someone specifically or anything like that, but what kind of code do you guys go by when you see or witness someone doing something, an officer getting out of line and doing something they shouldn't do? When is it that you address it? When is it that you take it, up to bigger, or what is that, kind of like that silent code that you guys live by that we don't know about?
Well, the guys that were involved in that stuff, and thankfully there was a small percentage of them, a little bit higher with the city of Miami police, and I'm not saying that just because I was Miami-Dade, two separate police departments, right?
Okay.
But yeah, the city guys, there was a lot more city guys that got involved in the high-profile scandals. That's not to say that police departments all over Miami-Dade had a certain number of people that were probably doing stuff they shouldn't have been doing. I mean, it's flat out illegal. So as far as the code is concerned, the code is very simple. It's against the law, and you're not supposed to be breaking the law. So it's your individual ethical framework that's going to say, I'm not living with this. I'm not going to, and there were guys getting turned in and I think they were very secretive about it because they knew that they couldn't take the chance of other cops seeing them do things. So, there was a group of guys, and as far as the hiring thing, part of that was the race riots we had in 1980, which were pretty much unrelated to the cocaine cartels and the Colombian drug trade and all that. That was a separate thing that had to do with police brutality, and so you combine the race riots, which lasted about 3 days of just total chaos, and then the crime rate that was going through the roof. And a lot of cops' families, they say, what are we doing here? Let's get out. Let's go somewhere else. You can be a cop somewhere else. Let's go to Des Moines, Iowa, or someplace that's quieter. So we did lose a lot of people right after that.
Did you ever feel like, you're kind of hitting your breaking point as well?
No, I didn't. I didn't. I wanted to stay. By that time, I was just 1982 is when I left a smaller agency and went to the county. And when I say a smaller agency, it was an agency of 90 officers. We saw cocaine and we saw violence in the street, no matter where you worked in Dade County. Once I got to the county, that I was on track. My goal was to go to homicide. So very little was going to deter me from that.
So being in homicide, you saw countless amount of deceased people. And I'm definitely not trying to pull you back into, any type of bad memories, but you had to have your fair share of seeing deceased people, seeing what it does to families who are involved, who didn't expect to see their loved ones die. And you've also seen what it does to cops. You also seen what it does to your brothers in arms in regards to how they deal with it, whether there was a kid involved, whether it was something that was grotesque, whether they had to do the killing themselves, whatever it might be. There's so many different variables. What is something that you think could be done differently to help, one, cops deal or express dealing with what they've seen? Because when we had our conversation a couple of days ago, you mentioned that most cops bottle it all up, and I'm sure that's a high number of cops that do. And bottling it all up, I would mean, if I was to say what I mean by that, I mean not get therapy, maybe not even vent it out enough, maybe not talk to enough fellas about it. You got to get this somehow out of your system. You saw a lot of that for many, many, many years. Maybe you had your moments where, you might have had a breakdown. You might have brought it home to your family, to your wife, or anything like that. What are some things that you think could be done differently? And also, what are some things that you would advise other cops with the amount of wisdom that you have from being in the career for such a long career?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a complicated answer because there's so many different factors going into this. And you're right when you say that every cop, you spend a few years on the road, you're going to see a lot of stuff. And in homicide, we saw death on a daily basis, and we saw all kinds of things. We saw the worst things that human beings can do to each other, and certainly things like little kids and stuff that affects you even more profoundly than any other case. But as far as what to do about it and how how an individual officer can address that. I think first it would start with the police departments, and it starts with the hiring process. And I would hire more mature people. Number one, I'm a big proponent of changing the minimum age to 25.
Hoorah on that one. I like that one.
And it's, I think that one of the problems we have is nobody can really train you and prepare you for what you're going to see.
Right.
They can tell you all kinds of things, but you're not really feeling the impact of it till you're there.
Of course, you got to get in the kitchen.
So, I think it's great for like an officer to have hobbies, non-police hobbies when they get home. You play an instrument, hey man, go jam out on your guitar or whatever. Have some non-police friends. It's a hard transition to make when you've been working 8, 10, 12 hours on some heavy duty stuff, and you walk in the door and you're in this different world now. You're in the regular world. You're in the non-police world. Your wife's smiling at you and going, hey, remember, we're going to Bill and Abby's for dinner tonight. And, it's just like you have to make this shift and kind of push away everything. It's not easy to do.
Right.
So, for somebody that wants to get into law enforcement, I would say don't hurry it. If you're 19, 20, 21 years old, and I think you can't be 19 anymore. When I was on, 19 was the minimum age, but I think they've changed that to 21.
Okay.
Which is a move in the right direction. But I would say, go get your college degree first or something. And it's not like a college degree is going to make you a better cop. It's not. But it's going to let you experience life a little bit. You're going to meet more people and understand more about people and situations. It's going to mature you. You're going to get seasoned a little bit. And I think a lot of the problems that police officers face, that the publics face because of immature officers, is rooted in that. So, and then on the other side, I think police departments need to constantly review their training processes and try and improve them as much as possible.
You had mentioned that these officers should, the hobbies, and basically trying to get away from what reminds you of your everyday job, right?
Mm-hmm.
Including the friends, the social group.
Right.
Do you say that because if I'm a cop and I only hang out with cop friends, some type of law enforcement, somewhere in that realm of law enforcement, could be a correctional officer, it could be whatever else. Do you think if I hang around those people, it's not going to allow me to release? If anything, it's going to stir it up because you're talking about it and you're talking about it. It's like, like a disgruntled group of people who are just bitching, a bunch of Karens, So
Yeah.
do you think it's kind of comparable to that? And that's why you suggest trying to find friends outside of that network? And if so, don't you think that going to the other group and then never actually being able to let it go off your chest, because I know you're saying find the hobbies. I know you're trying to say disconnect mentally, so psychologically try to turn that off when you get home. Man, if it was that easy, Ramesh, there wouldn't be such a high divorce rate amongst that. There would be so much better positions for what officers go through. So, what is the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, I'm not trying to imply in any way that it's easy. Right. I'm just saying that it can be a positive force. And the scenario that you just described with cops hanging out with cops, and that happens a lot, right? And when cops get together and have a beer or two or five, guess what they're talking about?
Right.
Hey, that chase we got in last week, and they're talking about police work.
Right.
And so you start to immerse yourself in this life, and it's very, very easy to create an us and them mentality. And that's the danger, especially with immature cops that are like, well, there's the assholes out there, and then there's us.
Right.
We're the ones that have to face the assholes, because you don't face a lot of nice people or nice situations when you're a cop. You're not being sent, to a quince,
Right.
to enjoy the celebration.
Right.
You're being sent to the house because there's a fight, or somebody got hurt, or there's some negative thing happening.
Yeah,
right?
someone did some asshole shit. Yeah,
exactly. So it's too easy for young cops, especially that haven't maybe gotten that a little bit of a life experience, to think, oh, all people suck. And that's really dangerous, right? So there's a book that was written by a great author named Joseph Wambaugh. He's since I think he just passed away recently. Great author, wrote books back in the 70s and 80s about police work. Most of them were turned into movies. The Glitter Dome and The Black Marble, several others. But there was one of his early books was The Choir Boys. And in The Choir Boys, it followed this group of patrol officers, this one squad. And they would get together almost every night at a park and bring a couple cases of beer and just kind of vent and drink and just, talk about their day. And they called that, the code name was choir practice. Like if they saw each other in the station, it was like, hey, are we having a choir practice tonight? That kind of thing. So, and that actually, art actually imitated, or life imitated art. To this day, you'll have squads that say, hey, are we having a choir practice? And that comes from actually the book. So in the choir boys would just sit and talk about what happened that day or that week. And again, that just immerses them in this police mentality, and they start to identify as being cops instead of, hey, I'm a human being first. I wasn't born a cop. I'm doing this. This is my job. I love my job. It's an important job, and I'm committed to what I'm doing. But I have to remember that I'm also a dad, a husband, all those things. And that's more important. And it's hard. It's hard to balance that.
With that said, do you think that the departments could offer more help in some shape or form, or maybe even obligate certain things? Like, if a cop witnesses if a cop's part of a shooting in which his shooting actually, kills someone, now should we now make it mandatory? Because whenever there's a death involved under your hands, you now have to go see therapists for 3 weeks or 6 sessions, whatever. Does something like that exist where it's mandatory? And if it doesn't, do you think is there something in the realm of what you think they should do?
I think some agencies probably do it. I don't know for sure. The counseling is available to police officers for free through the department. And I'm sure some agencies, I know most agencies will definitely say, hey, we strongly suggest you go to counseling, right? And we'll set you up for, 2 days a week or whatever it is. And some might mandate it. They might make it a mandatory thing. It can't hurt. It definitely cannot hurt. Maybe some time off. Maybe even before the shooting happens. Maybe even you're not involved in some big chaotic event, and every year you should you're going to be forced to take your vacation time, because some guys will just accrue their vacation time or lose it or whatever. It varies from agency to agency, but anything that the individual can do, the individual officer and the department can do to kind of redirect, this constant flow of stress and negative things that officers are seeing, and it is a form of PTSD. Not to in any way belittle what people in the military have gone through in combat. I'm not talking about that. That's on a different level altogether.
Right.
But studies.
But PTSD is PTSD.
PTSD is PTSD, and when you deal with a lot of death and you see a lot of grief, and you sit down with family after family that is going through this incredible anguish, like the worst time in their life, and you have to deal with that pretty closely, very closely. You're kind of a liaison. You're kind of a connection to their lost loved one. If you're the lead investigator, for example, in a homicide, they are going to be calling you and saying, what's happening with the case? And then when you make an arrest, they're going to be calling you and saying, when's the trial? Why is it taking so long? Right. What's going to happen? All those sort of things. So there's a multi-layered stress thing happening with homicide. And I'm not saying patrol has its own stresses as well.
Sorry for the interruption, folks, but I need to remind you guys just how fucking awesome you are. This podcast is hitting its 5th year, and we are celebrating by shouting you guys out. Thank you so much for showing all the love and support that you've been doing so for so long, and let's continue it. Not to say that it was any easier for you in your own personal life, but if you don't mind disclosing, how did you handle it? Because, not for nothing, I know we're going to get there. You did go through one marriage before you got to your second, and you do know what happens, and at some point, I'm sure you didn't have it figured out neither. How'd you deal with it? Because you definitely saw plenty of deaths and plenty of, horrible things. How did you deal with it? Did you go through different ways? Did you try one method that kind of worked, but then when we got here, had to work on something else? When did you feel yourself kind of desensitizing? Because that is inevitable almost to a great extent.
Mm-hmm. Well, the methods that I used were probably unconscious ones, right? There was never a time when I said, wow, I'm stressed. I need to find a way to de-stress. What am I going to do? I think it just kind of happened organically. And so I was blessed, or maybe cursed, with being able to write and liking to write. Okay, I always, since I've been a little kid, I don't even know where it came from, starting about age 8 or 9. And I had a couple of teachers in elementary school that were fantastic storytellers, and they used to read us books. And I really started getting into reading and writing when I was a little kid. And I loved it. I also loved sports, and I loved the way that writers in the Miami Herald, for example, could dramatize a football game that I had seen. Like, I thought, this is cool. Using words to do all this is really cool.
Right.
And so I would write about anything and everything. Our 3rd grade softball class we'd play softball against another class, and I'd write a sports article about it. And we didn't have a school newspaper. And I would show it to my teacher, and she'd be like, "This Ramesh is a weird kid. We don't have a newspaper, but okay, very, very nice. Get a pat on the head." But it was just something that I did, and couldn't stop doing. So when I got into police work, obviously there was a lot of material for me to write about, and any interesting call I went on, or crazy call, or a chase, or some particularly tragic thing that I might have dealt with that week, I'd sit down and write it in a journal. And then when I got to homicide, I kept doing that. And by the time I retired, I thought about, maybe I should start putting this stuff together. But back to, the core of your question was, I'm sure that was therapeutic for me in many ways, without even really knowing that it was, or thinking about it consciously.
Something that I do want to ask you about, and I mentioned it over lunch. I'm really not trying to stir the pot up, but I know it does stir shit up. It is. And I'm glad you're open to that. I really do appreciate that about you. You're very transparent, and you're willing to give your opinion, And I know it helps that you're retired, too, because if you were still, in the law enforcement, you might hold back a little bit. But I just had a guest on, I don't know, maybe about 5 or 6 guests ago, and her name is Catherine. And we were talking about feminism. Feminist movement, everything. I've always wanted to talk about it, but I never did because I didn't have the right woman to be here with me. I was not going to talk about the feminist movement with another man. We would have got bashed. It would have went nowhere. So I had a woman here, and anyhow, we had a great podcast, and we agreed on a lot of things, certain things, and then there were some things that we didn't agree on. But one that was a very big topic, and ever since that, we keep messaging each other with different viral videos that we see or incidents that we see. And that is in regards to women in law enforcement, and whether or not, I don't want to say that they should, but at least what their position is in law enforcement. So in other words, do I believe women should be in law enforcement? Of course they have that right, and they should, and they could. Now, do you want them on the street right next to the next male cop, working the beat? I don't know that I'm okay with that to a great extent because, and again, there's many viral videos right now. There's a viral video. I don't want to insult the guy, but it's a little Latino. He looks like a Mexican guy, and there's 2 women who are substantially bigger than him, taller and meatier and everything. And this guy on purpose was toying with them. He knew everybody was recording, and it looks like it's in a Denny's or IHOP, and he's just toying with them as they're trying to subdue him. They're trying to grab his arms. They're trying to take him down, and they couldn't do shit. And eventually some guy walked up and said, "Y'all ladies need my help." And they said, "Yes, please." Big gorilla-ass dude did a quick arm lock, took him down, held him. The ladies got on top. He walked away within 2 seconds. Just that quick. So that is wild evidence, in my opinion, of is this somewhere we want to put women in for the sake of their own safety, for the sake of their comrades, the officers that they're helping out as well, and for the safety of civilians who might be dependent on them to react a certain way or be able to accomplish a certain thing, with certain might and certain decision making. So, what's your take with that in regards to women in the field and what position, if you do agree that they should, of course?
Well, what you started out with, I mean, legally and everything else, that ship has sailed the harbor, right? I mean, that nobody's turning back the clock on that. I think that everyone, woman or otherwise, all right, needs to be able to complete the physical challenges, the physical tests that an agency has that are there to the criteria for getting hired, whether that's 20 push-ups and 15 pull-ups or whatever it is. You need to have that equal for everyone. That's my opinion on that.
Okay.
And have that published and have that understood so that if you're a woman or a man or whoever, if you're a 5'4" guy or a 5'11" woman, doesn't matter. This is what I need to train for so that I can get hired. I don't in the interest of fairness, right? I don't think we can just say that, okay, take female officers off the street, don't let them patrol. If they can fulfill the necessary physical requirements, they should get the job. And they also, in many respects, can relate to people and talk to people in a different manner that is sometimes better than having a male officer.
More nurturing, more soothing.
There are some people that just relate to a maternal voice too, and a maternal presence. But that's getting into a lot of psychological stuff. But I've worked with many perfectly sound female officers that looked smallish but were tough as nails. And a big part of police work, and I'll go this far with this question. Most of police work is not physical force. Most of police work is communication. And if you can communicate well, and if you can have a confident presence with somebody, and you should be able to control them most of the time. There are there are exceptions obviously to everything, but you shouldn't have to resort to physical force, even though we know that it's going to happen sometimes. And so I think the emphasis in police training and in police requirements for being hired should be on, again, going back to maturity, the maturity of a person, their ability to communicate, their ability to think quickly on their feet, be resourceful. That to me that kind of overshadows the fact that a woman might be a little less strong physically than the guy she's going to back up.
Right.
I don't think anybody that is frail and can't handle at least, a situation without getting beat up every time, that's going to be a bad situation.
Right. So let me take that pressure off of you a little bit, and let me not zone in on it being with the women, right? Yeah, I do have my take on that, but really no need to go deeper into it. What I will say is this. I think that physically the departments need to keep officers going through physical exams on a I don't know, let's say every 3 months, minimum 6 months. But I say that because every time you go through some real physically demanding issue, chasing somebody down, wrestling somebody down, whatever it might be, that's considered, somewhat of a fight. Okay, I'm talking as a coach, as a mixed martial arts coach. And like I tell my guys who are seeking fights, you need to stay in fight shape, ready. Fight shape ready. You have to stay fight, meaning we can jump into a fight within a week's time, 2 weeks maximum. That's how ready we are. That's the good conditioning. We're not eating like shit and getting fat, and we're not only, practicing bag work. No, we're getting it in the whole time because we're always gonna stay ready. You know, that's a hashtag everybody knows, especially if you're in a certain field. Stay ready, stay ready. Okay, so really it's not about the women, because there's a lot of heavy set motherfucking cops out there.
It's about the mindset.
Yeah, well, what I think is just we need to make, and I say obligate police officers to be more physically fit by continuously passing physical challenges that are given to them, if not 3 months, every 6 months. And if they can't pass it, and then on top of that, I think they need to intensify whatever that physical challenge is, whatever that course is. Because here's the thing, Ramesh, fucking push-ups ain't gonna take somebody to the ground.
Of course not.
It's not. Sit-ups doesn't take somebody to the ground. None of that does. Sprints are for real.
Mm-hmm.
You know, picking up maybe an 80-pound bag of sand and slamming it is for real. Getting a blue belt in jiu-jitsu or judo so that you can do these takedowns so easy, these sweeps that are just so easy to, I grab one wrist, I grab the ankle, I don't need no fucking help. It can be a 5'2", 120-pound young lady. If she knows how weight shifts and weights balance, and I got a wrist, if I just grab this ankle right here, the typical criminal, much less whether in any part of the world, but definitely in America, they don't know what to do when somebody does that easily, you know, the ankle pick, which is a small wrestling move.
Yep.
And that's it. I shift their weight, they fall down. If they would teach officers, if they would obligate officers to learn this, I know it was a thing going around in the jiu-jitsu community. A lot of it got stirred up after Floyd, and I know that how you feel about Floyd you have a great opinion about that, and I was strongly with you. Jiu-jitsu should be a staple for officers to a certain level, and physical tests need to become more strenuous, more challenging, so that all officers, no matter the gender, are always. I should not be able to see a fat ass sergeant who really fits the whole. Oh, he's just eating donuts. That should not be it. You know, a little pudge is okay, a little stomach is okay. I bet he can still haul ass. I bet he can still whoop some ass. You know, that's different. You know, that's where my take on.
No, 100%. I'm in agreement with you there, and I think, you know, the physical, or I should say the self-defense training that we went through was minimal, and it wasn't enough, in my opinion. And it was like once a year, okay, we're gonna do this remedial thing where, you know, you get a refresher on it. And it wasn't enough, and it wasn't a requirement that you reach a certain proficiency. Everybody went through the same kind of thing, and it really wasn't that intense. So I love the idea of teaching that. What I fear, the reality is that as an institution, we've gotten away from that by the implementation of what's called less than lethal weapons. And I'm referring specifically to the taser. And when the taser was introduced, and there was a couple of other smaller items that we were required to carry, but I'd gone out of uniform by the time the taser came in, right? I was in homicide, so I never used one. I was never trained on one. But I think what happens with the taser is officers start relying on distance. I don't need to touch people. I'm going to control them with this. And I don't know whether that's, you know, look, if it prevents the officer and the citizen from getting further injured, terrific. But I think it also changes the mindset, right? And I think somebody like you or somebody on the department that has a martial arts mindset and that feels confident in what they can do, like you were just describing, and the person's two feet away from me, I don't need to start backing up. It drives me nuts when I see, you know, somebody acting crazy in the street and the officers are backing up.
Right. And
I'm like, dude, that never used to happen. Like, hey, listen, you know, if two of us got to tackle him and beat his ass, that's what's going to happen.
Right.
You know, that's what's going to happen. We're going to get this person in custody and get him out of the street. And I'm not promoting police brutality or anything like that for anybody that's listening. I'm just saying that we didn't have tasers. You know, we had our own common sense. We used our communication skills as much as possible. But after a while, it's like, dude, if you're not going to do what we're saying, we're going to be on top of you and we're going to roll around and maybe both of us are going to bleed, but you're going to jail. If it takes two of us, if it takes four of us, you're going to go. And that was our mindset. of course, I would much rather see officers proficient in martial arts and confident about being able to do that, men and women. And the whole thing about relying on tasers, I think, kind of softens that mentality. I don't know. I could be wrong about that.
What's up, folks? Sorry to interrupt this podcast, but I had to take my time to remind you guys just how awesome you are. Thank you for continuously to show so much support throughout these 5 years of us doing what we do. Truly appreciate it. And if you do too, please don't forget to subscribe. And if you like the content, hit that thumbs up. Matter of fact, if you want to show a little bit of extra love, how about you send this link to a friend? Truly appreciate all the support. Now let's get back to the show. Well, you know what? I see nothing wrong with the tasers, and I even saw that they were coming out with a new invention where it shoots the lasso that goes around your feet, especially if somebody's running.
Right.
So it shoots string that goes around, kind of got some weighted balls and trips them. You know, kind of like some superhero shit. You know, like some Batman thing there. But it's legit, and I think that's cool. And I see the concept of getting the distance. For instance, you know, when my clients get good enough at boxing and kickboxing, and you know, we got all these combos, we got all these funny names, you know, this is like human names, just regular, stupid names. And there would always come a time where that client would be like, hey, Wes, you know, this weekend I went to the bar, I was with my friends, you know, and I know I didn't get in no issues, but I saw some dudes getting into it with some other dudes, and you know, and I was just thinking, man, that came my way, you know, I'd fuck somebody up, you know, I know I can do that now. So it made me want to ask you, you know, Coach, what combo do you think would be the best combo that I should do if I'm about to get in a bar fight? Like if somebody comes up to me and let's say they're yay big and so on and so forth, do you think I should do Rob or should I do Rip 'em? Or do you think I should do, you know, Kung Fu, whatever, you know, just names that we have.
Right.
And I immediately tell them what kind of relates to the taser gun. I tell them, no, you don't do none of that shit. The first thing you do is you stick your fucking arm out, you get your distance and you say, hey, keep the hell away from me. Back off, because you need to protect yourself from going to jail in case you fuck this individual up, because you now are a skilled fighter. You now are going to hurt the majority of anybody you go against. So get the distance to defend yourself. Hey, try to neutralize it. Whatever you got to say it from over there. Don't come any closer or I'm going to defend myself. 9 times out of 10, that individual, especially if they're the ones who are, you know, looking for the bullshit, they're going to step forward again. Oh, really? Like, what you going to do?
Right.
At that point, you step back one more time. Most people think I say hit them, right? No. I say step back again. You have got to get your ground. Okay, this is really about to happen. At this point, you're running the reps in your head and you're getting ready. You're getting yourself psychologically ready for combat. So you're kind of buying time. But what you also did was further secure that you have witnesses watching what is probably about to happen. You gave time for people to be like, yo, I can't hear what's happening. I don't know why it's happening, but I saw that guy stick his arm out twice and say, back the fuck up.
Yep.
After that second time, get in your stance and show them that you have a legit fighter's stance so that when they recognize, damn, this guy's standing like somebody in the UFC, maybe they're going to think twice about approaching you. But once you get in your stance, you say, if you come near me again, I'm going to defend myself.
Mm-hmm.
If they do, which 8 out of 10 times they will, I tell them kick. I say, do one kick to the leg. I promise you that should be enough. And they're like, really? And they're always dumbfounded. I'm like, yeah, you want to use something from distance. Anybody has a chance of hitting you if they throw wildly. If they're intoxicated or they're high on cocaine or something else, you might hit them with some punches and they just stay right there in front of you. You know, they're inebriated. Yep. So if you're within their range, they can hit you. So stay long. That one kick is going to send their mind, their psyche is going to go somewhere else and say, first of all, that felt like a bat just broke my bone down there. No one's ever been kicked legitimately before. Then they're also going to think, this guy knows some type of kung fu shit and I'm about to get my ass beat. And all this off one kick. They're not going to just bum rush you. More times out of not, that's going to say, okay, we're done here. The guy's probably going to walk away. You didn't have to whoop him. You didn't have to hurt him. You throw hands, you knock him out. He can hit the floor. He can hit a chair. He can hit a desk, whatever, and you kill him. And now you got a manslaughter charge. So I get the taser thing and I get backing off, but still, if shit hits the fan, because again, viral videos left and right of people just snatching the wires off of them, just like nothing.
Yeah, I mean, it's rare, but yeah, that does happen. So again, I have nothing against tasers. Maybe I'm just a little, biased. I come from an old school dinosaur place where we didn't have them, and so like I said, if it prevents people from getting hurt, officers and citizens, then, it's a good thing.
I agree. I definitely agree. There's obviously it's no one's saying listen, cops have it. I can't even think how many people have it more difficult than cops. Whoever it is out there, maybe the frontline people, at war. I don't know. It's hard to think. Certain firefighters, in California, where they go through hella fires. Police officers in certain places like Chicago and things like that. But anyhow, officers have it top 5 most difficult to deal with the shit that hits the fan. And I'm never trying to paint a pretty picture or make it sound like it's easier than what it is. But I think it's evident, and you are the perfect example in sitting here now, that things have to be changed. Things have to be modified. Things have to, be addressed in order for us to be in a better place, especially so that society can be more accepting of officers. I feel like it has gotten to the worst where it's like you said earlier, it's like us versus them.
Right.
And that's horrible.
And to further your point about that, police departments and police officers need to display professionalism on the street, right? They need to come across professionally. They need to act professional, look professional. That's going to have the greatest effect on citizens. We can have the public relations people go on social media and say how great our police department is, but it's the actions that the citizens see more than anything. How does this officer deal with this situation, right? And does that officer's actions and behavior give you confidence when you're looking at him, right, or her? So, I sound like a broken record here, but it's going back to the maturity aspect. That's a big factor. It's a really big factor because 90% of the time you're going to calls and you're not using physicality whatsoever. It's your presence. It's your ability to communicate. It's your ability to talk to people and listen to people.
Right.
Listening is
it's a skill all on its own.
It's undervalued.
Yes.
And because we human beings love to hear ourselves talk and we love to make our own points.
Right.
But if you're not listening to somebody as a police officer and your attention is elsewhere, or you're thinking about what you want to say, you might miss something that they're saying that could be a danger to you, or it might be important in an investigation or whatever it is. So, and people get pissed off if you're not listening to them. We're talking about female police officers. We had one officer on the small department I worked for, inner city department, Opelika here in Northwest Dade. And she was a very capable officer, all right? But she had a mouth on her that she got into more fights than anybody on a department because I would go on a case, and see you all jacked up, and I'd go, "Hey, Wes, take a breath, man. Do me a favor, have a seat, and I'll get to you. I promise I'm going to listen to your side of the story, okay?" Mm-hmm. She would say, "You shut your mouth." Okay, and so all you're doing there is you're throwing fuel on the fire. That's all you're doing. That's all you're doing. You're asking for trouble, and then next thing you know, she's rolling around on the floor with people, and it's not where you want to be. Officers, contrary to what people may think or hear, or the perceptions from social media, police officers go to work. They don't want to get involved in shit like that. Right. They want to go home with a clean uniform.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, because the moment you're in a struggle with somebody, there's always the danger of somebody getting your gun out of your holster and killing you with it. It's happened. So it's not just getting some bruises and a cut lip. You're in danger of somebody taking your life if you get in that situation. So we want to avoid that at all costs.
All right, Ramesh, I want to read something to you that I was writing earlier because I wanted to give you room to, I really think that from getting to meet you a couple of days ago and getting to learn about you and doing a lot of literature reading on you. I haven't gotten the book yet, to my neighbors, but did a lot of reading and, hearing your stories and knowing people like yourself who've been through a lot. I feel like somebody like you holds a lot of wisdom, and you're a teacher now, and you're spreading that wisdom in different increments, I guess depending on who it is that asks for it. But I feel like somebody like you, I wrote this here. I said, coming to America in a freighter. That's what you did. Maintaining an illustrious career as a homicide detective during some of the wildest times in Miami's history. Witnessing harsh crimes and the horrible effects of drug wars. being married twice and having 6 kids. God damn, Ramesh, you couldn't have stopped at 4 or 5?
Well, three of them were from her former marriage, so
Oh, okay.
a blended. What do they call a blended family, right?
Okay, all right. Well, we got that one fixed. All right. You're now retired after 27 years, and your passion is in educating our youth in law and different levels of law, and I'll let you talk more into that. But one would have the right to say that your advice stems from great wisdom, and I truly do believe that. So with that said, what's some good life advice that you'd like to close out this podcast with? You know, we take our time, but some that the viewers and listeners could definitely apply to their lives, whether it's the students, you know, who you influence over there at, shout out to Coral Reef, right?
Yeah.
Shout out to Coral Reef High School. Shout out to my boy. By the way, Darren, appreciate you, buddy. You know, you're the reason that I got to meet Ramesh, and you're the man. We were just talking about you off camera, bro. You're awesome, and I'll see you next week. But yeah, man, you know, you're a man who definitely has wise words, and I would love to hear some of those wise words on advice, some life advice that you would give people based upon everything you've been through.
Well, I appreciate it. I don't know if it's wisdom, maybe just call it insight based on my experiences, right? Because I think everybody's got a certain amount of wisdom or insight based on what they've done and
of course.
what the things that they've lived through. I think looking back on my career, one of the things I value the most, and I learned so much as a police officer and a detective, but more than anything, I learned about people, and that job teaches you about people. It teaches you about people's motivations. It teaches you about what kind of situations people get into and what kind of choices they make, why they make them or not make them, what motivates them to do crimes or be witnesses or whatever it is. Because especially as an investigator, you have the ability to sit down. It's necessary that you sit down with people and talk to them in great detail. And while you're talking to them about what they saw or what they know about a case, you're also learning about what kind of person they are. You're learning about their life, because nobody just tells you, I went to the store, whatever. They give you little side stories, and, they tell you a little bit about why they went there, or, that their husband was out of town or whatever it was, that you start to learn about the way people live. And for a young person, and I say young, I was in homicide. I was 27 when I got to homicide. That's valuable stuff that you can't get out of a book. You can't get in a training course, anything, dealing with suspects and talking to suspects and trying to get confessions from them. And you really get a lot of insight into what makes people tick. Okay. And so translating that into this wisdom or insight thing, I would say, when you're a young person, don't underestimate the value of people. Learn from people, listen to people better. And I say that because when I was in uniform, I would come home from work and not want to be with people, because I was dealing with people on a chaotic basis and a negative basis, and going to calls and, seeing people fighting under their Christmas tree on Christmas morning and, nearly killing each other. And come on, you go and you just go home and you just want to decompress, and
exactly.
you don't want to deal with people.
Right.
And that's not a healthy thing, right? Because you're going to shut yourself off from other people. So I would say, when you meet a new person, whether it's a new neighbor, whether it's somebody you're introduced to, whether it's an employer or a fellow employee, take the time to learn a little bit about them. Listen to them, right? We all love to talk about ourselves. And you'll find that when you go to a cocktail party or a networking event, and, there's always, you're going to talk to somebody who wants to blab about themselves and what a great service they have and how you should take their business card and call them, et cetera, et cetera. Don't be that person. Be the person that says, tell me about yourself, Wes. How did you get into martial arts? What motivated you to get into that? Show an interest in people, and organically they will show an interest in you, because they will appreciate that. Think about that. Put yourself in the shoes of a person that's being asked, hey, that's really interesting. How did you get into this? What do you like best about it? Things like that. Well, I read a book once when I got into real estate. I was a realtor for a while when I left police work. And I read a book called Endless Referrals by a guy named Bob Berg. And I would recommend that to anyone, no matter what line of work you're getting into.
Endless Referrals.
Endless Referrals. Fabulous book. And he talks about that specifically. He talks about if you want to win people over, if you want to get people to remember you, there's things you can do to do that. Don't be the guy at the door handing out his business card. I don't even know you, man. What do you want me to do business with you? I don't know who you are.
Right.
All right. So take the time to find out the value of people. And I believe that there's something I can learn from anyone, regardless of whether they're different than me politically or racially or age, gender, doesn't matter. There's something I can learn from everybody. And police work taught me that, honestly. Police work reinforced that in me.
It's wild that you said that of all things that you could say. This podcast, having this podcast that I started, and I always forget, 5 years, 6 years, I'm not sure. It made me such a better human being because I forced myself to listen more. That's what a good podcaster should do. Based upon whatever podcast you have, I force myself to listen more.
Right.
Literally zone into what these people are telling me and pay close attention to it so that I can, give good feedback, ask the right questions. And anyhow, through years of doing this and, so many guests, I've become a great listener. And that has transitioned to a good conversationalist,
Yes.
and it's helped, I say this humbly, it's helped people enjoy spending time around me and having talks with me.
Sure.
It's influenced people to trust in me what they otherwise haven't trust. Like, Wes, I don't know what it is about you, man, but I feel like I can trust you. It's the podcast that helped me do that, but really what helped me become a better person was just listening more. So the fact that you're saying that, you're one of your biggest pieces of advice is to, listen, get to know people by listening. That's great advice. That really is. That goes a long way. It does.
I think we overlook it, right? I think
Right.
a lot of people overlook that. And I wish I had really been better at that earlier in life. But, when you're young, you just, you're pursuing things that you think are important. And I'm not saying my career wasn't important, but I think after a few years in homicide, that's when I really kind of reflected and said, wow, God, this is an amazing profession. That if somebody would have told me that I'd get this kind of insight into people's minds and motivations, it's incredible. It's an incredible thing. It's a gift. I'm very blessed to have done that for as long as I did.
Right.
And I don't think I really fully realized the impact of it until I sat down and started writing the book and putting it together and going, wow, while I was doing it, you don't realize what a unique job this is and the challenges of it until you look back.
You said that one of the things that inspired you to write the book, even though you were already organically jotting down things on your journal, was you wanted to leave something for your kids to remember that what you're part of. Where does that stem from? What are those roots that stem from that?
Yeah, I think that it's really important as a father, like as a parent, that we tell stories to our kids about our lives. I think that it's important for them to hear that. Storytelling in a way is kind of a lost art, especially today when, we're so involved in our electronics and our gadgets and all that stuff. And we kind of lose sight of the fact that we have people in our lives, like our parents and our grandparents, who have incredible stories to tell and can kind of flesh out this foundation of where your family came from.
Right.
And I used to hear stories from my mom, but I would love to hear more. I wish she was still around and she could tell me stories and more stories, right? Those are the things I always remember. So, again, it goes back to valuing people. But yeah, that was the main idea of writing the book was I don't want my grandchildren to just hear from my son that, oh yeah, your grandfather was a cop, period.
Right.
I would love for them to be able to read this book and go, wow, this is what it really meant to do that job.
So speaking of your book, I know you're working on another one, but it's not part 2, right? Or
No.
is no?
No, this is, Badge Tie and Gun was a memoir, right? And now I'm working on fiction. I love writing fiction, so it's complete.
How close are we to any of that? I know we spoke about it, and when it comes to publishers and all that, oh, it's a fucking.
It's a different ball game with but I've already written one novel, and I'm just scratching the surface on a second one. So the first one I'm trying to get sold. I'm trying to get the ear of a literary agent who has shown interest in it. That's kind of step one. And then once the literary agent says, yes, I'll represent you, then she goes out to try and sell it to a publisher. So that's where I'm at with that one.
Get your ass in gear, people. we need those books. I'm sure that they'll be great. I mean, shit, I've read so many of those types of books. Jack Reacher, I think you got Jeff Cross. There's a bunch out there.
Michael Connolly is another good one.
Yeah, I can see yours definitely landing there sooner than later. I hope so. Definitely. And last but not least, man, you're leaving a big impact on our youth because you're a teacher and you're helping teach them. And I had mentioned in my last podcast, Jeff, who's the owner of Apocalypse. He gave a big shout out to teachers, and he was saying that to this day, I think he's 38. He'll never forget that one teacher who approached him when he was 16 and pretty much convinced him to not drop out, and that's huge. And we started talking about how important it is, to have that passion, and now you're doing that. It's great to see that you're doing that. And you said that recently, you had got some type of compliment, and it kind of hit you in a way.
I love teaching. I'm teaching at Coral Reef Senior High School. Go Kudas. And and I love teaching there. It's a great school with listen, who knew? I didn't know that there was such a thing as criminal justice being taught in high schools. When I retired from police work,
right.
We never had such a thing.
Right, that was college for me. Yeah.
Nothing, right? So I wish they had it. So it's a privilege to be able to teach that and have the ability to interact with these young people and hopefully affect their lives in a positive way. And I always talk to them about life as much as I do about understanding the Fourth and Fifth Amendment and all that stuff. It's important for them to know that they've got some big challenges ahead of them and not to take that for granted, But yeah, I love it. I love the job. I'll keep doing it as long as I can.
Ramesh, I truly appreciate you guys. I want you to remember, if you're interested in getting his book, go to Amazon. It's called Badge, Tie, Gun, Memoirs.
Life and Death Journeys of a Miami Detective.
Life and Death Journeys of a Miami Detective. Again, I got mine waiting next door. I got to bother my neighbors tomorrow once they come to work. Guys, if you enjoyed this video, if you enjoyed this podcast, please don't forget to like. Don't forget to share it with somebody. And if you haven't subscribed yet, come on, show some love and subscribe. I would say go follow Ramesh on Instagram, but he is never on there. It took me forever to hunt him down.
I'm bad with that. I'm probably on Facebook a little more often and on Twitter and that sort of thing. So
but
I do have a website. But.
It's Ramesh Nyberg is his name, Ramesh, and then Nyberg, Nyberg, in case you guys want to look that up. And you were about to say you have a webpage?
Yeah, RameshNybergAuthor.com.
So show you some love, show some support, guys, and I appreciate you guys for tuning in. I got a lot of new guests lined up. It's going to be a great way to close out the year, so make sure you stay tuned. And Ramesh, man, I really do appreciate you, man. Thank you so much for all this.
It's my pleasure.
Great storytelling that you've done and the advice that you've given us, man. And I'll love to touch bases again sometime in the future, okay?
I'm looking forward to it.
Take care, guys. Peace.